You're listening to The Brief, a podcast from the Business Council of Alberta. I'm your host, Scott Crockett, and in each episode, we dive into the stories of innovation, economics, and the people working to make life better for all Albertans. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to The Brief, and thanks for tuning in to BCA Podcasts. I'm Lily Dupuis, Digital Communications Advisor here at the Business Council of Alberta, and I'll be your guest host for today. On this special episode, I'm joined in the studio by two major Alberta business leaders. Murray Cunningham, President and CEO of Scott Builders, welcome.
Thank you, Lily. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And Mike Brown, President and CEO of Trico Homes.
It's good to be here, Lily.
Together, Murray and Mike co-chaired the Task Force on Business Priorities for Thriving Alberta Communities, which built the foundation for our newest report, Municipal Matters. Today, we'll be diving into the work of that task force, what they learned, and what's next for municipalities all over Alberta. But first, I want to hear a little bit about your guys' journeys because your stories really set the stage. So, Murray, let's start with you. From what I understand, your very first job out of university was with Scott Builders, and you've now been there for more than 25 years. That kind of company loyalty and growth within one place is pretty rare these days. What kept you rooted there?
Yes, Lily, it's a pretty boring resume with one line on it. My wife says either work is pretty good or I'm pretty scared to look elsewhere. So maybe it's a little bit of both. I'm not sure. The reality is that Scott Builders has a terrific culture, and really the values that I learned growing up and are very similar to what we experience at Scott Builders. So it's about treating people right. It's having a safe place to learn and grow. A strong focus on partnerships, being positive in the community. And what we find is that the better we live those values with our clients, our people, and our trade partners, we attract those that want to work with us and conversely repel them. I'm certainly interested in it. It's kept me there a long time.
That is very cool. And I don't think the resume is boring just because it has one line. I think that's kind of awesome. Okay, Mike, let's move over to you. Mm-hmm. So your path is a little bit different. You've kind of moved between a business and policy lens throughout your career. You were VP of Business Development and Retention at Calgary Economic Development. Is that right?
Yes.
Wonderful. You studied political science.
Yeah.
Awesome. And now you lead Trico Homes. So what drew you to that intersection between business and policy, and what do you think it taught you about building homes and communities?
I'd even go a little farther back in terms of what influences me, and it's really was my family. My family, I'm a third generation Calgarian, a third generation Albertan. And in that, public service was always, a big part of who my family was. I have two grandparents who were policemen. You go through the entire, everybody served in some sort of way. For me personally, I wasn't one of those guys that saw, government good, private good or bad, or vice versa. I always saw it as, where can I do interesting work and where can I serve my community? And one of the things that really worked out for me in the end is, working for Trico is I work for a company that's put this community first and aligns very much with me. Our owner, Wayne Chu, has always said, doing good by doing well. And that's something, it's a mantra that's carried me through my time at Trico. And to be honest, it's probably a mantra that's been there my whole life.
Do you think that kind of gives you a sort of different perspective, like that background, that, even family tie? Do you think that it informs your work still?
Oh, absolutely. Like I think we're all, a product of our past, and, we're also a product of the biases that come out of our past. And I definitely feel that, an understanding of policy and the role of policy and the role of government, as well as the role of the private sector and how they can work together has served me very, very well throughout my career.
Murray, I'm going to throw it back to you. If we rewind to that fresh out of high school version of yourself, what were some of those twists, risks, or defining moments that set you on the path from, the job site all the way to the C-suite?
I was probably like most high school guys, kind of an idiot, no idea about anything. But I was really lucky as a young person. I had people who believed in me. I had people who pushed me, and a lot of times told me things that I should try that I didn't even know would help me or existed. And so it's kind of a Forrest Gump story. You just try things and it works. In high school, I liked sports. So I moved from a small town. We had 80 people in our high school in Manville. To Vegreville, it was giant, 400 people. I know that's ridiculous when you talk to people in the city. But really, sports got me to university, started on one degree. Then I realized, well, I'm probably not as smart as my brother, but he's in engineering. Maybe I should try it. And so I move over to that, and it is harder than I thought, but probably sports helped me get through that. And then you get opportunities, and you say yes to them, and get good connections. I end up meeting a young lady there. She has a degree. She's going to be teaching. I finish my degree, end up moving to the same area, which happens to be Central Alberta. So we start our lives in Lacombe, and I walk around Red Deer with my resume. And one day I walked into Scott Builders, and so now, how I actually got hired and then rehired is a longer story, but I'll just keep it short. So I really just kept saying yes to opportunities. I just kept saying yes to new projects, new roles, and more education, raise a family, volunteer in the community, all those types of things. And so you end up building a life and a career. And so I've been incredibly lucky doing it. I just feel like I say yes a lot, and things turn out for me.
It sounds like both of you had a real kind of focus on community throughout your upbringing, throughout your careers. So I think that that's kind of the perfect segue into this discussion about what we're here to talk about, the task force. So maybe just for our listeners who might not be familiar with the report yet or the work that the task force has done, Murray, can you start by just telling us what exactly the task force on business priorities for thriving Alberta communities is? And maybe more simply, when it was created, what problem were you guys trying to solve?
Certainly. So the Business Council of Alberta puts member CEOs and their staff together on task forces, just really to produce policy to make lives better for Albertans. So it's all nonpartisan. It's all really an approach to sort of meet that mission. And so this task force was formed in June. It had a very strong response from our sort of member CEOs and a lot of commitment to really be involved and work together on what would be a tight time frame over the summer. Now at Scott Builders, we work on construction projects, in municipalities across the province. And there's really terrific municipal elected officials and people in administrations. And really, from a business perspective, we're just interested in the same outcomes. And so we're sharing our views and strategies to achieve them. One of the things that we know, and is a general thing out there, is that businesses pay about half of municipal taxes. But the surveys are now showing that only about 20% of businesses would recommend their municipality to other businesses. So it's 20%. So that's like us in the business community not paying attention to half of our customers. So all businesses in Alberta operate in some municipality, whether it's a city or a town or a rural municipality or county, and really how they operate is very important to business. And so this policy report is intended to be released in a week or so here in September, and we hope it forms an important policy discussion around the upcoming municipal elections, around the municipal leaders that hope to be elected, and really the issues that we raise and how we hope to work together.
You talked a little bit about what we do at BCA, the members that we represent. I know that there was also a survey that we conducted of our members. I think 47 of them responded to it, and it's a survey of all of big Alberta business leaders. So what did that survey tell us about what business leaders are concerned about right now, or what matters to them when it comes to running their business in whatever municipality they might be in?
So the survey gave us great information around how business is feeling about how things are working. And it's really no surprise that crime and public safety were right at the top. So, really, like learning to work from home, having that flexibility, those are good things. But business really thrives when people are in the workplace. And when employees don't feel safe in the area around their workplace, then everyone suffers. This isn't something that's just in big cities. It's a really sad trend in our rural areas and smaller communities as well. So we also got a lot of feedback on red tape and permit delays. Just one interesting stat was about every 3 years a business applies for some type of permit through an expansion or process change or improvement to their business, and they apply through that to their municipality. And the surveys show that 50% of businesses have trouble getting that, and that they say the situation is getting worse. The third big issue is how business sort of interacts with municipalities. And so we just see generally that there could be improvements to that, and that policy and budget decisions just aren't that aligned with the long-term prosperity. And so if really municipalities are businesses, and so if you are not paying attention to 50% of your customers that well, and each year it gets harder to do business with you, and then taxes go up, you're raising costs. That's a difficult environment to continue operating in.
Both of you have co-chaired this project since day one. Mike, did anything surprise you about working with such a diverse group of task force members? Like, every person on this panel comes from a different business, a different background. Some of you might be doing similar things. Some of you might be doing very, very different things. So what was working with this group of business leaders like?
It was really interesting for me. It was an amazing process. So you kind of start off and you have your own experience, and we all have our shared experience, but we have our own experience. So experience I have obviously is, I'm in Calgary, and so what reads front page of the news in Calgary is what I'm aware of. What I didn't recognize is how doesn't matter where you live within the province of Alberta, they're experiencing some of the same things that we're seeing in the big cities. And so that was probably the big piece. The other piece that I was really, I wouldn't be surprised by, but just the level of concern and interest that the membership had in terms of actually wanting to be part of the resolution of this. Oftentimes, and it was kind of an underlying discussion point for the group, was it's about, and yet Murray used the term prosperity, and it's about prosperity. And it's just like we as a province, we as regions, we compete globally. And if we don't address some of the issues or challenges that, Murray listed off that we talked about, we're not going to be competitive. And if we're not competitive, we're not going to thrive as a society. And thrive is not about just making money. Thriving is about, living a great life. And those are some of the things that I think really showed up throughout the discussion is that people do care. They care a lot, and they care across this province, and they want to be part of a solution.
We all win. There's good policy. Is there a specific story or example that kind of stands out to you where those different business perspectives strengthen those recommendations?
One of the things that's going to come up in our discussion is around the mindset that we have. And I think a way that you can get that is, how do we develop a shared mindset? So you don't have, if you're working on the policy, or if you're on what we call the government side or in the municipal leadership side, you have a mindset, and then in private, we have a mindset. We probably should have a shared mindset. And so that was one of the things that's a real example. And I think one of the things you need to recognize is nobody goes into their job, whether they're working for the municipality or they're working in the private, and say, I'm going to do a poor job today. Everyone goes in with best intentions. They want to move it forward. But really is like there's a need for calibration around what the goalposts are and what we're working towards. And I think that was one of the big areas of discussion that will provide great opportunity.
That's really thoughtful. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So with this report, it opened with a specific goal to identify the most pressing challenges and chart a path forward. What did the task force agree were some of the biggest barriers standing in the way of thriving communities?
So it was shared amongst, it wasn't, the cities or rural. And there was kind of three areas that I already talked about the role of prosperity, but the three areas that kind of really came up was, the declining quality of life. Whether that's true or whether it's not true is the perception of those surveyed, and the perception of those in the room is our quality of life is declining. The second is around housing costs, and housing is something I'm in, and we oftentimes focus on our cost of homes and say, well, Toronto, that's much more expensive, or Vancouver is just a recognition that we're actually becoming very expensive, and so it's becoming more challenging for people to actually have a life here. And then the third one was, and I wouldn't, and these are not in order, you could probably put the third one first, was crime. Is the patience that the people have, whether it's around the table or their survey, is they're wanting to see that resolved. And that's not a downtown Calgary or downtown Edmonton issue, that's across Alberta. And it's, as Murray had mentioned earlier, it's makes it very difficult for people to live their lives and as a result thrive in our province. And so those are the kind of the three things that I saw popped up.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I also think that that's a great way to kind of acknowledge what the three pillars, the foundation of this report was. So Murray, can you talk a little bit about those three foundational pillars, and can you walk us through maybe what they are, and why these three?
And Mike and I have been introducing them a little bit as we've been talking, and so the public safety and crime issue is just very serious and real. And although we hear of small improvements in some areas, it's just not moving fast enough. And it's there's very many sad parts to it. Many of the people are in need and they need our help, and we have to work through all of that. But we're focused on the business conversation here. The public safety, it's just not a nice to have. It's not something that we all think, well, that'd be nice if we had it. It's really critical to business formation and growth. We can do all the downtown beautification projects we want, but if you don't feel safe there, no one will go. And so really the report will have a number of ideas in terms of how business perspective thinks we can improve public safety. One of the things I just wanted to mention is really just how maybe governments can think about working together better. It's the same business that pays taxes municipally, provincially, and federally. So it's one business. And so really that business doesn't really care how it gets solved, what level of government's getting credits, who's responsible for what. But what happens is business has to make decisions. They have to make decisions of how they operate, how their employees work, and they're going to try and make it the most attractive place so that they can work. What we're really looking for is government to just say, well, it doesn't matter what level it is, get them together and fix it. Don't let the ideology or the pride or just get in the way of the job. And so the other two things we've already talked about really is just the easiest thing to control in business or government is your cost. And so reducing your cost and your red tape is a really good start. It's not different in business than it is in government. When things are okay over the long term, every business, every government, they add risk reduction, they add processes, systems, people, and all of those things add layers. But what happens is the more you add doesn't always reduce the risk more. And business, certainly in Alberta, the last 10 years, we've had a lot of creative disruption. There's been a lot of change that have forced and continues to force business to be competitive and interact and improve and get better. I'm just not sure that government has had to do that. And so we really have to take a look at it, and maybe government needs to imagine a competitor. And the sad thing is there are competitors out there that they're not that imaginary anymore. So some of it is getting more real, and government maybe hasn't noticed. The last thing is just how business and government can work closer together. And Mike mentioned this, but I just want to take it in the direction of, it feels like the economic development that government sponsors and supports and sends is completely interested in new business. And they should. But the easiest customer to win is the one you have. And when half of your customers don't, or 20% of your customers would recommend to someone else they be there, it's not great. I'm imagining and worried that there's a lot of economic development officers and municipal governments that are out chasing some of the federal C5 nation building projects, and they'll get pulled into boondoggles. And so if we want them to grow, we want them to aspire, but maybe stick to the things that you're good at and stick to the areas that you can succeed at. And so we think that just helping local business, making them work together and survive, it's going to help your community much better to work that way, and just helping them grow and thrive.
I also really appreciate the business advice analogy for government.
Well, Marie raises a really good point. And part of my bio is I worked in economic development, right. And it was proven out time and time again that if you want growth, your growth is going to come first from your local businesses. It's when you go out and chasing these whales, and you're trying to get a whale, you have to chase a lot of whales before you actually land a whale. Whereas if you have something local and you can get them to grow in size, it's exponential growth that you see. So no, very good point, Murray.
I think that this is actually a really good segue into, that mindset shift that we were talking about earlier. And for listeners, I do want to explain that both of you kind of have voices in different types of municipalities, different sizes. So that's why part of your expertise, co-chairing this project is so valuable. So I will put this to both of you, and feel free, whoever wants to take it first. What is that mindset that's holding communities back, and what's the new one? What does it look like?
To be honest, I think we're in between shift in mindsets, and it needs to go a little farther. So, when I look back, where we are right now is government engages the business community a great deal. Mm-hmm. I think the challenge you have, though, is defining success. And so one of the challenges I have is success the fact that you've engaged the business community, or success the fact that you've actually aligned, where you're trying to go. And sometimes I feel like we've gotten to the point of engagement, and I worry greatly that we'll do this podcast and the responsible will just engage businesses more, and not recognize in terms of it's that you actually need to be ahead of the curve a little bit, and you actually have to listen to what the business is, same as the constituents. Should be no shock to anyone that the issues that we're raising today, if you had the electorate in the room, they'd say the same things. And so I think there's a really strong alignment between where business feels the opportunities are and where the electorate does as well. The mindset piece going in is, and this is, I'll just call it out for what it is that similar to we need as business community see government as an enabler that's going to help us achieve success. Government needs to view the business community as the same thing. It can't be about growing more and more government for the sake. It's just like, well, we can't trust the business community to do that. We need to do that ourselves. It needs to shift where it's like, hey, is this something that businesses can take on and really challenge and move forward? Let's enable that. And I really want to see real partnership, as I say, as opposed to just kind of, hey, Mike, what are your thoughts? Okay, that's great. Yeah. Let's go away. We'll think about it. We'll write it down. We'll think about it. We'll reflect on it. It'll be considered.
Yes, lots of considering.
Yes, and I really want it to go much farther than that. And then also recognize, like, we get very excited about the investment dollars that governments make in terms of our communities, whether it's in, all across Alberta. If you actually wrote up the number that the private sector invests in these communities and looked at it, you'll see that the impact is actually quite dramatic. And so just recognize that, if the local government at regional level spends $1, let's make sure it has a huge multiplier. Let's make sure, because that $1 was there, you're going to get $10, $15, $20 for every $1, as opposed to just success being, well, we did the $1, we're good.
Mm-hmm. Or we heard you, now we're done.
Yes.
Yeah, the working together topic, Mike, is incredibly important. I'm just glad you're highlighting that. I think it's awesome. I'm gonna take a little bit different direction, but just get into some specific examples maybe. So in terms of a mindset shift, really what we look at is municipalities, places where people live and work, and we need places for that both to happen. So whether it's redevelopment space, whether it's new spaces, whether you're in housing like Mike, or whether you're in general commercial and industrial construction like us, we need places to get things built and for business to thrive. And so I'm going to say the zoning word. I know that's a big topic, but I'm really just going to say it like this. It doesn't matter whether the process is an easy process or there is space to do redevelopment or space to do development. As long as that's there, and the regulatory process is right, then business can come in and help solve those problems. Mm-hmm. It's not about government sitting there saying, we're going to fix all these things. Just make the processes easy to work through. So when it's sticky or uncertain or costly, that business goes somewhere else and they're not going to help. And so the other point I want to raise here is really about how municipalities and businesses are quite alike. And so when you start to think about the scale of some of our municipalities, so even a small city has a $50 million budget, is a $50 million business. So we get into some of Alberta's mid-sized cities and they're $500 million businesses. Calgary's going to be almost a $5 billion business within a few years. And so, I'm not proposing any changes to the democratic process or how we elect anyone or anything like that. But if you were putting people onto a board of a business that was a $500 million business, you'd be really looking for some expertise and experience and training in terms of financials and vision and governance and strategy. And we don't need to change the process, but maybe we need to work together closer. Maybe we need to just educate a little bit more and help more, because these are really big businesses. in terms of how they operate.
And it's also, really timely as we think about tons of municipalities in Alberta are heading toward some sort of election, and they will be electing the CEOs or the board of directors or whatever for their business. And knowledge is power.
Well, and they have the opportunity, one of the things that I think Inherent Murray kind of tongue and I'll reinforce is they need to start thinking the long game, not just the 1 year game. It's not necessarily about the big whale that you're trying to bring in the city. At the municipal level, it's about, are you keeping up with your infrastructure? Are you keeping up, all those issues? Those are a bit the long game, but it's just important. And, where I like to support politicians is I always ask them, what's your vision? It's not necessarily, I'm not looking for the big, are you going to big ribbon cutting? What's your vision? Where are you going to take the community?
Let's bring it back to kind of the main, topic that we discussed is one of the most important things that you guys found while doing this task force, while talking to these other business leaders, yourselves and running your own businesses. Crime and social disorder, safety, one of the pillars. It's safer, more vibrant communities. How are these issues showing up in everyday business life? I'll put this to you, Murray. And what's at stake if these issues aren't addressed?
So business likes to operate in the most efficient way possible, most open way possible to the public, to their customers. And so what's been happening is to address these issues in their own business, to keep operating. There's been more barriers put up. There's more barriers to the public. There's more barriers to access. There are physical barriers. There's more security. There's more security systems and people. And business is just generally less open. And in a lot of cases, business is moving their business to other places that have less friction or less issues. But this all adds cost for business, and none of us want to do this. And the sad thing is that it's one of the things that's the opposite of how we help solve this. It's a really big issue. And there's brilliant people working hard at the parts of this that business can't solve. There's a crime element and a big role for police, of course. But a lot of this is also about mental health. This is about serious addictions issues. And we have a lot of terrific experts working on that. But really, business can help some of this. And so we want to be a part of it. And Mike mentioned that earlier. That was one of the things we found from our members is just the interest and the passion from the members in being a part of helping with this. And so one of the other studies that I heard about talking to someone who works in homelessness is there is a growth in the amount of people who are working who are homeless, whether they're actually out and homeless or whether they're sleeping on a couch or in a garage. And so more business usually means better business, means better paying jobs. It can help. So all we're saying is that part of your community's public safety strategies is to work to help business thrive and be part of it. There's other parts that are very important, but we just think that part of it could be this.
Mike, you've had a bit of a front row seat for this issue through your work with CMLC in Calgary's East Village, a community that has definitely seen a lot of change in the past decade or so. So what did you learn from that work, and what do you recommend as the way forward?
It's it's a very complicated topic, and I think I saw the shift even when I worked at Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, where you'd get to know the people on the streets by name, and then mental health issues started to become more prevalent, so you actually didn't engage as much. I'll share a story, though, is where the private sector actually has an impact as well as the public sector. And so from a CMLC, which was owned by the City of Calgary, a real thing for us is to bring the average person down to East Village. And we believe that if the average people felt comfortable coming down, and safety is not politicians and police always see it as a stat. It's not a stat. It's how do you feel? Do you feel safe? If you don't feel safe, you're not going to go. It doesn't matter if somebody tells you it's safe. It's just like, how do you feel? So that was one of the things that we focused on. There was a building down in East Village that was a really well. There's a number of people that live in the building, and they were having a real problem with one of the sides of their building. And so the solution that they had in place was there, and I understand why they did it, because they have additional security costs, they have additional issues that come up as with it. They had people wandering through their building. What they ended up doing is they actually locked off all the doors on that one side of the building. What that did is actually create an even better environment for that negativity to take place. And so I think that that's one of the things that education on both sides has to take place, so that you can actually, get more people coming to, and it's not a Calgary and Edmonton case. I was just driving around Alberta on Monday. This is something you see in many, many places. And so I think you really need to look at it as a solution. It's not about money. It's sometimes a bit about strategy. And how do we align our strategies? They had an issue in East Village years ago where we had encampments. The encampments were never an issue as per se. The issue is what happens in the encampments, the drug use, the sexual assaults that take place, those issues. And so we needed to really keep dispersing those encampments, not from the point that somebody that's homeless is doing anything wrong. It's the folks that are preying on the homeless and looking for that. And it's how do we, and so there really needs to be, and similar, if Trico, we were in the Beltline. We had similar issues in the Beltline of Calgary. We were constantly moving people along because we knew at the end of the day, if you move people along, it's going to be better safety. The worst thing that can happen to a leader, and so I'm a CEO of Trico Homes, and Murray's a leader of his company, is something happens to a staff member on their way to work. That is the absolute worst thing that could happen, more so than any kind of security issue, theft, more so than a safety on the work site. That is something. And so what we end up doing as business leaders, if you don't feel that safety's there, if you don't feel that there's support there from it's not being cleaned up, you're forced to move your business to another location. And it's not because you want to, as business leaders do that. It's that you don't want to put your staff, who you're responsible for, in any sort of harm's way.
You both touched on how businesses themselves can play a role in building safer communities. Can I push you a little bit more on that? What else can businesses do?
Well, I think businesses are doing already, but it's getting to the root cause. We talked about mental challenges. One of the things I think you need to recognize, we have a business community that's very philanthropic. It gives a great deal of money to not-for-profits, to healthcare. That's a real key role for business to play. So you can actually deal with it at the source, as opposed to dealing with the problem at the end. That's a real, I think that's an opportunity to even do more of. I think the other part is to really be clear with your local government in terms of what your challenges are with your business. So, and for the government to respond in kind very quickly and say, we need to bring resolution to this, because it is a real issue, and perception is a reality. If people think that's what's happening, that's what's happening.
Yeah, I would just add a couple things to that. So when I see the task forces in the communities that are dealing with homelessness, mental health addictions, there are a lot of business people that are on those, and there's a lot of really tremendous volunteer time and energy that's put into that. And the only thing I'm saying is that some of what the business community and the municipality work on are there to do with the issues that there's other experts for mental health addiction. What I'm talking about here is really in terms of making things easier for the business community to operate, making it easier for them to open up and take that risk to open up in that vacant storefront. And so how could you do that? Because that generates traffic, that generates just more people into that. Just like Mike said, when you close those doors off, it creates more of a situation. Really, like I visit Calgary a lot, work here a lot out of our office, but really I have the benefit of coming here from where I live in Lacombe, and I get to see over the years what's changed. And for a while in Calgary, the whole downtown was very quiet, and so it was different. And so really the economic situation changes. There's a lot more people here, a lot more housing, a lot more work. And so really you feel much safer. And I don't actually know if the really sad problems have changed in the statistics, but the amount of safety that people feel because of the amount of business and residents that are here, it makes a huge difference. So I just look at it and say there's a lot of people involved in it, and I just hope they're thinking about it from the business perspective as well, and just making sure that that freedom to operate the business is part of it, because it will help.
Yeah, I really appreciate you both. I know it's talking about community safety is always a difficult conversation, but I appreciate you both really kind of humanizing the issue and making it, again, about our healthy, vibrant, prosperous communities. Let's shift gears to that growth and development side of things. From your perspective, Mike, as a residential builder, what barriers are slowing down growth right now, and what would it take to fix them?
So it's interesting because I'm going to say, and I've worked as a residential builder in what they call the greenfield, and I've also worked in brownfield and downtown core. One of the things I worked on in my past is the Bow project, which was very fortunate to do. And I'll say, oftentimes the jurisdictions will come back and say our timelines are actually quite good. They're actually still quite long to get approvals. But they're good if you benchmark us against other cities, and we're comfortable with being average. And I think one of the things that we have to try to aspire for is this is Alberta. There's no reason for us to be average. We don't have to be average. So I think we need to raise that. The second piece is it's uncertainty. And so one of the things that happens with our municipal leadership is, and it happens with administration, where different topics or ideas are presented and become kind of the theme of what's going on in the planning industry or what's going on in, engineering. And they'll introduce it, and what that ends up doing is, with those new ideas, at times raise a level of uncertainty. And so that uncertainty actually adds to the timeline where, you put your submission in, your submission comes back, and they're like, yeah, we like what you're doing here, but we're thinking you should do something like this, and that something like this could be a really good idea, but might not be financially viable. Mm-hmm. And that timeline, which people don't understand, is that when you start a project, the investor, whether it's the homeowner or whether it's, we'll do bigger projects too as well, it's a bank or a REIT or whatever going through, they're interested in doing that project right then. If it takes a year or it takes a year and a half to get through the approval process, they may not have that same level of interest. Other jurisdictions may have that level of interest, especially in Calgary, where our markets have a tendency to fluctuate so extremely. And so those are some of the things that I guess the key message I'd have is, let's not be average. Let's actually look at let's look at speed. Let's look at, how can we lead as opposed to be in a position that, well, we're not as bad as the other guys and we're not as good as these guys. So
that's a great point. I like that. We're Alberta. We don't have to be average. Murray, on the non-residential side, you've seen this landscape evolve over decades. So what's changed? What hasn't? Where do you see the biggest opportunities to cut red tape and streamline things moving forward?
It feels like the last 20 years it's been like an arms race between business and municipalities. So every year, local governments add to their permit or zoning or bylaw process, and then to continue working, businesses spend more time on the efforts to work through those things. And then as it progresses, more people are added and into municipalities to administer this. And then, of course, more layers of process are added. So now businesses all need specialized staff and pay high fees for the compliance to work and do things in the municipalities that we operate in. And so, another part of this is municipalities are great at sharing information with each other, and that's awesome. But even smaller municipalities now have learned, and they've added all these similar layers. So, and I'm all for standardization, but when the standards continue to evolve into the most complex version, it's just not creating any efficiency. And it never goes away. It just keeps getting more and more difficult all the time. So one thing about business, and I've talked about this a bit, is it's excellent at evaluating risk, or it won't be in business. And so it's it just feels like municipalities are, they're unnecessarily delaying their own growth. They're holding back public safety improvements that business could help with. And they're actually reducing their tax revenue because they have added years and years of risk reduction on top of each other. And I'm not sure that they have evaluated what they're saving themselves from. So really, if they want to get serious about it, and Mike mentioned the average, and so I'm not sure who they're comparing that average to, but it's probably larger peers.
Right.
And so we need to have excellence in Alberta. And so, and I think we should ask the same of our municipalities. So work at it, keep track of it, and work towards improvements. So I do have just a short example. I don't know if
no, please.
So like we used to get building permits within a short time. We used to get inspections on the site, reasonably soon after you call them, within a few days. And so now it varies between municipalities, but permits are months and months and months to work through. And so instead of an inspector showing up, basically in some municipalities, they ask you to submit a picture of what you've done. And so I'm all for efficiencies, but I'm sure there's a number of companies that are just submitting the same picture.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty sure that next what will happen is we'll have to invest in AI because big cities will be investing in AI, smaller cities will start, just to make bad processes faster. And so if you think about it, when you cross a border and they don't inspect all the bags, they don't look through every bag. And can you imagine if they said, well, if you show me a picture of what's in your bag, I'll let you go through. And so we're kind of in this situation where they're trying to continue to figure out how to improve a bad process. What if they just looked at standardizing things, make the people responsible, the consultants, owners, construction group responsible, and change to spot checks and really increase the fees for fines. So that's really how a lot of different systems work. You could have the same process, it would catch just as many, and it would be much faster and more efficient.
Great example. I'm happy that you shared that.
Well, and just to add to the example, I think it's good for the listeners to understand is the ultimate group that's actually responsible for the building that's getting built is the construction company and the engineer. And if there is an issue, it's not the municipality that's at risk. It's actually the others that are at risk. So it even gives it more like you have an engineer stamp, you have somebody that's gone through and planned it well, the architect certified it. So it doesn't, just to add to that.
Yeah, it's absolutely the way it works. And these are great people working in cities and inspectors are all, but we have to rethink the whole process and go, is it valuable to do this? I mean, if something goes wrong with the building, it's I've never seen it go back to the city.
Right. No, great point. You touched on taxes a little bit, so let's talk about that. Taxes are always a hot topic as we come up on a massive kind of season for elections across the province. This report specifically kind of zeroes in on some inefficiencies in the municipal tax system. So, Murray, what are those inefficiencies and how do you think they affect companies trying to grow and invest more locally?
I hate to be short in my comments for once, but when you look at the surveys and what are happening, yes, businesses always want to reduce their costs. So it's a cost. If we could have lower taxes, we'd all enjoy that. But the priorities and the things that have become our pillars, and even things like cost of utilities and some other items, usually rank higher than the cost of property taxes. I think the disjoint is how the property taxes get used, the partnership, all the things that we've been talking about. So there's a few small things that I would mention in this. I think it's important that municipalities have the opportunity to set their own tax rates so they can be competitive with others. So that should continue, as well as I think hopefully they're aware the amount that their tax incentive programs stimulate business and the amount that it doesn't. There's very few businesses that are making decisions of what they're going to do based on just the tax incentives. It's going to push a few people in a certain direction and help a little bit. It's important that communities have that ability to do that, to stimulate a little, but it really doesn't change a lot of the behavior. What the changes behavior is going to be the overall business climate, is going to be the overall ease of doing business, is going to be the things that we're talking about.
And I think one of the things with taxes, it's important to expand it out. We oftentimes, think of taxes as corporate taxes, or there's also levies that are in play. There's some user fees that are in play, and all those costs. There seems to be a belief, if I can just add, that if you're in a municipal government or any government and you add a cost to a project, a levy or a tax, that cost is actually borne by the business, that owner himself. It's not. The cost is actually borne by the end user. It's borne by the customer at the end, and that's part of that getting that mindset. It's just calibration, understanding in terms of really how where it goes. And when you add levies, and some of our smaller municipalities are looking at adding significant levies. In many ways, you're going to turn off investment in your community, whether that's by a new company coming in or an existing company that's there.
Obviously, the financial stewardship aspect of this is more important than just the conversation around cutting taxes. The report also gets into the idea that businesses need more of a voice at the municipal table. Yeah. So what would meaningful business representation look like, and how do you think it could change the way that city councils and municipalities make those decisions?
So, I've already articulated that I think we have no shortage of engagement that's taking place. So asking the questions about, the park on the corner, what do you want in the park, down to, getting feedback. I'm constantly getting reached out by the approving authorities, and how are we doing as an approving authority? I think that's fine. And if anything, in my personal thing is I think it's overdone because they're not listening to it as much as I'd like to see. Maybe they are, and I'm just not giving them credit for it. Any municipality or region, they'll all have business plans. They'll all have goals that they have, and what I'd like to see is actually having businesses engaged in the development of those plans, where they're actually at the table. I know Calgary is going to go through a municipal election. The first thing they're going to do is get together as a council and to say, okay, what are our priorities? And I think at that point in time, it'd be great for them to get feedback from the business community leaders in terms of what are the priorities for the community. And as I said before, the priorities for business are very much the same as the priority for the electorate. The only difference where it may be is the businesses, because our projects, they're not 1 or 2 or 3 years in nature, they're multiple years. We might have a little bit of a longer view on what we're looking for, but that's where I would like to see that engagement take place, is actually setting up the plan itself.
And I think that it does kind of all come back to your point of engagement is great, but if we're not applying the feedback, what are we doing?
Well, and they have it's interesting because, when I say is government collaboration is really important. So there was recently an announcement, economic development, Calgary Economic Development, I give them great credit for it. They successfully were able to create a regional economic development approach. That's great. What I'm actually more interested in is not the fact that they did the approach, which I think is a great starting point. It's what are the results? What do they achieve at the end of the day? And those are the things that I think it's just a shift a little bit, is that, how can we, and I think that's where us as the private sector, and it doesn't have to be me, but the right people at the table are saying, this is what success is, this is the plan to get to success, and this is how we'll measure success, not just kind of like we'd like to do more of this.
Mike, I really like how you keep highlighting that longer term vision and how that connects. I mean, you think about it, we're both running businesses that are really long term focused and really have good histories and are interested in that long term. So we spend a lot of time thinking about it. And so I think that it's a great point to really highlight for municipalities to think about their future and how they really develop over time.
Before we wrap up, let's talk more about that long-term vision. Alberta's municipal elections are right around the corner. New mayors, new councils, new opportunities for change. So again, I'll put this to both of you. If each of you had the chance to stand in front of those newly elected leaders later this year, what's one piece of advice or call to action that you would want them to remember?
For me, it might be more of a challenge and some questions to start. I mean, if your municipality was a business, how would you run it? How would you ensure, you have that long-term vision that Mike keeps highlighting, which is so important. But what about financial resiliency? What about how can you be competitive against your peers? And then how do you measure that? And so where does your revenue come from? Is there an awareness of that? And how easy it is for your customers, whether it's residents or business, and to work with you. Business pays half the taxes. They're the ones that will take the risks to fill the empty storefronts. We'll take the risks and we'll donate to local charities, local sports teams, local community programs, local events. Really, we're interested in the same things. We're interested in thriving communities. So we just want to work with us so that we can help.
Yeah, mine is, I often reflect, we're in the situation we are, and we definitely have a perspective as municipalities that, the three issues we talked about, crime being the biggest in terms of, is kind of like, well, it happened to us. And that we had absolutely no role in creating it. And I think one of the recognition I would say is you have to recognize policy decisions made today are going to impact you in the future. So one of the big challenges we have is within our communities, we talk about crime, is we talk about mental health. Mm-hmm. Well, in the late 90s, early 2000s, we reduced spending on mental health. And so now we have a mental health challenge that we have to work our way through. Similarly, we just went through a whole discussion about, shortage of housing, as communities. We had really high in migration coming from all across Canada and internationally. We restricted growth within our communities, and then we're shocked that we reached a point of being unaffordable. Now, I'm not saying this to go back and say, "Oh, poor decision." I'm just saying you need to recognize that what you do today is going to have an impact 5 to 10 years out, and the issues that you may not see as issues today. And really as leadership, what I'm looking for is not somebody that's so dramatic. And so dramatic to me is like, well, we do blanket zoning and it has to cover the entire municipality. And then we go back and we say, well, we got to take it all away. Mm-hmm. We do bike lanes. Bike lanes everywhere. We go back and say, we have to take out every bike lane. I'm looking for some more thoughtful leadership that actually looks at the big picture and understands that, what you do today is going to impact you tomorrow.
So would you say nuance in policy making matters?
Yes.
Was there anything that maybe I didn't ask you guys that you wanted to make sure that you came here and told me and told our listeners today?
I think for me, it's just, and I think we saw this from our membership, to get back to that, is they're proud Albertans. They're proud of the communities they live and work in. And that, they're at the table, and it's even not just at the table of this, but they have memberships in chambers, they have membership in many different organizations. They're committed to their communities. And so you have all this talent. I think one of the things that really behooves us to is unleash that talent. And don't feel that you necessarily, when you have these big challenges, it's about bigger government. It's about, how do you use the talent that's available to you?
What I think about is I think about how and it's similar to what Mike said, but it's how we realized that as BCA brought this topic up to us, and there became quite an involvement in the support for and ideas and how do we make this better? How do we help? And so I think that it's really smart to put policy out at this point to say, okay, how can we help and challenge ourselves? Because like Mike said, it's not something that is happening to us. We have to be part of this and help figure it out. And what can we do from our perspective? We're not the Mental Health or Addictions Act. We're not that. But what can we do? What can we bring to solve these situations? One thing that came to me was a couple of years ago, we worked on a long-term unemployment study. Brilliant people working on it from a number of organizations and BCA and because Alberta, unsurprisingly, had persistent long-term unemployment. So people that were unemployed for longer than a year since about 2015. And so we were working on this in 2021 or so. And so the report goes out and everybody goes, let's work at these. And then, a few months later, wow, those things got way better. So did we do awesome? No, it's just the economy got way better. Mm-hmm. And so the long-term unemployment disappeared or went back to more normal levels. I think that business can play more of a role in a lot of these things. And I'm not even sure that we know exactly how that would work out, but I think we're here to help, and I think it's an important topic, and I'm really impressed that there's so many people that have kind of got behind it.
And I'm grateful that you guys are here to help.
Well, thank you.
Murray, Mike, thank you guys for joining me today, and thank you truly on behalf of BCA for the important work that you've done co-chairing this task force. To our listeners, if you'd like to read the full Municipal Matters report, you can find it at businesscouncilab.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
That's a wrap, but the conversation doesn't stop here. If today's ideas inspired you, share the episode and help us keep the momentum going. You can also support the show by rating and reviewing us wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in to The Brief.